Miss Lewis. How's the start to your school year?
Good morning. It is going okay so far. I must admit this SLO is a learning experience, but my year is going well so far. Thank you.
You're welcome. Well, it's been a learning process for all of us here at every level, but I'm looking forward to learning a lot more about what goes on in the classroom and looking at our collective efforts to support student growth throughout the school year. So thank you for your efforts.
Right. So I worked with the instructional coach to develop my SLO, and I sent it to you last week. I'm hoping you got that.
I did. Thank you so much for sending it ahead of time. What it does is it helps me because I get an opportunity to look through the student data and get really familiar with your students, and then it'll help me prepare for our meeting.
Okay.
So today we're going to review your plan, and I'm going to give you some feedback, and we're going to make a few minor adjustments. Keep in mind that, again, this is a learning process for everyone. Okay, so most everyone will be making some adjustments to their plan. Okay, so we're going to review that. Be patient with yourself. Okay, I'm going to start by talking about what you discovered about your students.
Okay. So let me tell you what I found in my baseline data. I focused my SLO goal on reading for two reasons. One, it fits with our overall literacy goal for our school. And two, if we focus on reading, I think it'll transfer to other content areas, so we'll see growth across the board. So I'll start with the MAP assessment. I looked at their first grade MAP reading scores. There wasn't anything glaring there with the scores, but because MAP shows more of a composite and doesn't drill down into some sub-skills, I decided to administer the Dibbles assessment. And the scores there pinpointed the skills and abilities of all my students.
Right. I did see that you used the Dibbles assessment, and using more than one assessment, 2 to 3, typically is the best practice because it gives you an opportunity to see what your students know, and it gives your students an opportunity to demonstrate growth in a variety of different ways. So talk to me about what you found there.
Okay. I found concerns around word recognition and fluency. 4 students are at risk, and 4 students need to increase their speed and also their sight word.
Good. So again, using those multiple data sources you see helped your practice quite a bit. The Dibbles gave you a little different picture about what your students know. It allowed you to drill down some and look at those sub-skills, whereas the MAP data gave you a more broad, global assessment of your students' reading and reading comprehension. So are there any other data that pointed you towards fluency?
Yes. The first couple weeks of school, I observed my students' oral reading. I don't have the data here, but I observed their oral reading. And my students' levels run the gamut here. I have some that are well below, some that are on target, and some that are above grade level. So I have students that range across the board.
I did notice that when I looked at your Dibbles assessment and your MAP scores. You've got a wide range of abilities in your classroom. And you pointed that out too when you talked about your growth targets. So based on what you've seen thus far with your students, I want you to think about your typical student. Okay, and then think about your students that are performing below that student and how far those lower performing students are performing below your typical average student. Okay.
I'm not sure how far below they are. They have to be reading at about the first grade level, but that's typical of what I've seen in previous years.
That's true. Exactly. That is pretty typical performance, but I'd like to hear a little bit more specifically about how their skills in reading and what they can do, because what we'll do there is take that and refer back to the standards that'll help us figure out where to go with these students next. So, like, for example, you've got student 1. And student 1 here is in the beginning of last year in first grade scored at about a 166. Okay, if you look at your lower performing students this year, they're scoring around 166 and some of them even further below. So that kind of gives you a benchmark here. Think about the skills in kindergarten and the skills in first grade that your students may be proficient in and the levels that they may be performing, and that'll help you figure out where to go next with them, because it's clear from the data that they do require some intensive intervention.
So I'll admit I got hung up there, but based off what you just said right now, I know what to look for, what to look at, and what to research. So I'll investigate that more and then get back with you.
Great. I really want us to sit down and have that conversation once you figure that out, because it's important that we close those gaps for those students. So now, let's focus on your students who are performing at grade level. Okay. How are you going to know that those students are progressing between your MAP and DIBELS assessments?
Okay, well, I've listed that in my plan. I'll use running records, observations, and incorporate some high-frequency, more advanced spelling words.
Okay, good. So let's talk a little bit now about your instructional strategies.
Okay.
That'll help us determine what supports you might need moving forward. I noticed here that you talked about using flexible grouping. Talk to me about what that's going to look like.
So I have mentioned flexible grouping. I am trying to incorporate it, but I struggle with flexible grouping. I'm having a problem ensuring my students work independently while I'm working in small groups.
Okay.
So that's a problem for me.
So let's talk a little bit more about this strategy. How much time do you devote setting up your procedures at the beginning of the year for your students and what it should look like during flexible grouping?
Maybe 1 or 2 lessons at the beginning of the year, but I do give brief reminders prior to us moving into groups.
Okay. So I recommend that you connect in with Jane. She uses flexible grouping quite a bit in her classroom. Her procedures are really strong. Her students always know what to do. And again, she uses this quite a bit. And even her activities that she has for her students, they're really solid in enriching learning and helping them practice new learning.
Okay, that would be great.
So we'll set up a time for you and Jane to meet.
Okay, thank you.
Great. Now, how do you plan to address those students who are already advanced in these skills that you're assessing? You've got 2 students here that have already scored pretty high on MAP, and they're off the charts in DIBELS. I see you've addressed a few strategies on how to help these students.
Okay.
Talk to me about that.
So I think I will need to incorporate some above grade level text. Again, as I mentioned earlier, some high frequency spelling words, and then some differentiation and instruction.
Good. Solid thinking.
Okay.
I suggest that you check in with the gifted and talented teacher. Okay. He may have a little bit more data on these students, and he'll also probably be able to give you some strategies that you can use in the classroom to help address them.
Okay. Funny thing you mentioned that. I actually set up a meeting with him a couple weeks ago, so we're on target to do that.
Good, great. So now let's take a look at the SLO review template in the review rubric here. First of all, your plan represents a solid start. There are a lot of strengths in this plan, but there are a few areas that we want to make some adjustments, okay? So in particular, I want you to describe for each of your students in each group in terms of what they know and then what you expect them to know and perform and how you expect them to perform at the end of the year. Okay. You mentioned that you had some recordings of your students as well.
Yes, I have them of students 7 and 8.
Great. You're right. Yes, you sent those to me. Let's play those now.
Okay, so student 7 is reading with expression and self-correcting, but it concerns me that he's missing those words because those are sight words. And then student 8 is a slow reader, but accurate. She just needs to practice rereading the same text to increase words per minute.
So I'm encouraged by the fact that you're looking closely into what you can do to help student 7. And you seem to have a solid plan for student 8. I'm sure that if you think about your students who scored at about that range, they probably have some similar needs. Okay. So when you and I come back together, I encourage you to choose one of those students from each target band, your high, your mid-performing, and your lower performing, that represent typical performance for students at that range. Okay. And then I want you to think about those strategies that you've identified to support each of those students and to help you use that to help move the other students on that same trajectory.
Okay.
Okay. Then continue on through the mid-course and then through the end of the interval. And recording those students too will help, and we can use that evidence at the end of the interval to help support your outcomes.
Okay.
After our meeting, I want you to go ahead and make the adjustments that we talked about and resubmit your plan. Once you've done that, I'll go ahead and approve it for implementation, and then you can get started. Okay. Is it possible that you can have that by the end of the week?
Yes, I should be able to do that.
Great, good. And finally, I want you to think about how you're going to record your documentation and your student data. Here you've already set up a spreadsheet, and this is good. It'll help us be able to access the information quickly and to keep track of everything going on. So continue to use that spreadsheet. Okay?
Right.
All right. What questions do you have?
I don't have any questions, and I know what I need to do before our next meeting, so thank you.
Great. Thank you. And I'll go ahead and set up that meeting with you and Jane.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you. Have a good afternoon.
You too.